Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima is a game that came out a good while ago that I've been wanting to cover for a long time, as it stands today as being one of my favorite games of all time. Not only is it a game that completely blows out in the terms of the open world aspect, it's a game that also got a director's cut that I never played. And in that director's cut it has a new DLC, and I never touched that. In addition to that, today we'll also be covering the co-op mode that I personally consider one of the best co-op modes made. I think it's an incredibly solid experience and one that we should dive right into. Ghost of Tsushima is one of those games that I've thought about a lot since I first played it. Not because the story isn't particularly any good. It is very okay and even good at some points. It's just that it wasn't what captured me with the game. No. The reason why I kept thinking about Ghost of Tsushima since I played it the first time was, quite frankly, its open world. It is the first time in a game where I felt like an open world gave me a break from being in an open world game, in the sense that it's a world you get lost in. Not just because of all of the amount of constant stimulation there is, but because in the game itself, you're encouraged to take a breather, go and take a shower, do some focus training with your sword, that sort of thing. And everywhere is a screenshot. It is actually that beautiful. You could turn around any corner of Ghost of Tsushima and get a perfectly good screenshot. It is beautiful. In just about every way, at every point of the game, it is beautiful. And it really is also just a piece of art coming together. Because here's the thing. Ghost of Tsushima as a individual game is pretty boring. Like, let's be real, even I'm a pretty big fan and even I can say that. The combat itself can very quickly get fairly repetitive. Simple fact that it's an open world game means that there are a lot of repeat activities. Like, you have a lot of the spas you go to get you some more HP and so on. A lot of these elements does carry over. It's the presentation that makes it so different. Because in a game like any Ubisoft game really, they also have a bunch of objectives and things you do to upgrade your character. But it doesn't feel as gamey. It feels more like something that you stumble upon through, as an example, the removal of the map marker and the complete removal of the radar or compass system from any other game. And it is working to its advantage in such a big way, because in Ghost of Tsushima, when you will go somewhere, when you have like a marker and this is where you want to go, instead of that just being a giant ass taking you out of the game, marker slap dab in the middle of your screen, good luck finding anything. No, it's the wind that's guiding you. It's maybe the trees blowing in a certain direction. And then you go a little bit and you sort of end up, I wouldn't say getting lost, because people also describe that with games like Skyrim. You go to another building and you get lost. In Ghost of Tsushima, that's not really the case. Not in the same way. In Ghost of Tsushima, when I say get lost, I mean you get completely immersed in the world. It is the heavy and thick forests, you know, the bamboo trees sticking up the fields you're riding through, that makes it feel alive. It is going into a village and seeing that people are just going about their business. You know, it's tough times and they don't give a shit about you really. It is things like that that really makes the game stand out. And that is not saying that any other part of the game is bad. The combat is completely serviceable. Hell, I'll even say it is pretty good and should be standard for most open world games. I think the way the combat is done in Ghost of Tsushima is, at the end of the day, despite how simple it is, a pretty satisfying system. There's nothing that ever gets over the feeling of parrying an enemy in the perfect time, so he sword launches up and you can go in for the killing blow. It feels good. It feels really good to play like that. It is again very much like the parrying system in Sekiro, where it feels really good once the stagger bar is filled up and you can like actually go for the kill. It's the same sort of feeling and like intense satisfaction I get from playing a game like Ghost of Tsushima, despite the fact that it's not as hard. Because inherently parrying is just a lot of fun. And the same thing can be said about almost every other part of Ghost of Tsushima. The systems it has in it, maybe even despite the fact that they are very minimal, really serves to further this bigger picture of it. It feels good to play. It is fun to play. It is good to look at. And most importantly, it makes you believe that you are in a world. You aren't the world. You're just in it as another character. And I think that's really, really cool overall. And I think that's something a lot of open world games struggle with. And the thing is, you can do a lot of the things that these normal open world games do, such as, the entire simple copy pasting buildings into mass. So there's a bunch of places you can walk to. You can do that. And Ghost does that. A lot of the places can feel somewhat familiar because a lot of the houses are copy paste. And it is okay because the way that they do it, it makes them feel unique and different enough to the point where you won't notice while you're playing. And to be quite honest, I think it's completely okay to reuse some assets. It's kind of fair that they can make a new unique asset for every rock that you see. It's alright, it's just that it has to be done in a respectful way, which is this thing that Ghost of Tsushima do, where it isn't just one-to-one the same. It is always some differences in it, and that's necessary. If there isn't any differences in it, it will feel infinitely too similar all of the time. Which is an issue that unfortunately, in my opinion, plagues the combat a little bit. The combat in Ghost of Tsushima starts out feeling really good, and it continues to feel really good. It's not that it's a bad combat system, it's that it's a fairly limited combat system, unfortunately. The reality is that you have really your sword and your bow in Ghost of Tsushima, and then you have some of your abilities, but overall it always ends up being sort of the same loop with each of them. There's a lot of uniqueness to it, but that's okay, as what is already there is more than enough, in my opinion, to sustain the game the entire way through. I will fully agree though, I think having more weapon options would have for sure improved Ghost of Tsushima. And I'm hoping with Ghost of Yotoi, it actually will do that. They will include more weapons. We've already seen the main character use a gun. We can only hope to see more from it. That being said, Ghost of Tsushima in and of itself takes place during the Mongol invasion of Japan, as you probably know, and it follows Jin Sakai, the last surviving member of the Sakai family, who, has to rescue the island after everybody else dies and his uncle is captured. Throughout his adventure, he meets all sorts of wacky characters, goes on all sorts of wacky quests, and finds all sorts of wacky weapons. It's what you would describe this game as if you really wanted to be boring. The reality is, yes, it is all kind of correct. This way does take place during the Mongol invasion and all of that sort of thing. But Jin Sakai as a character is one that starts out being bound to the code, full on with honor and all of that. And throughout his adventure throughout Tsushima, you learn that you might not be able to win exclusively with honor because your enemy isn't fighting honorable. So you end up using ghost weapons and stealth and poison throughout the game. And the game, while it does have the cool parts where you find the Mongols, also has the drama aspect, which I appreciate a lot, which is the interpersonal connection that you have with your uncle. Because your uncle has raised you since you were a child, and the DLC or expansion that was more into like the personality your uncle has and like how your relationship was with him. But more so, the game itself focuses on this breaking of the code, as your uncle is a very by the books type of guy. He's the leader of the island, and it makes it so that you also by virtue have to be pretty honorable. You can't use stealth and so on. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that part of the story is insanely good, but it has this issue where in one of the missions, your uncle tells you to wait and then you should launch an honorable attack. However, you don't really have a choice. You have to go in stealth and do all of this stuff. And while it is very, very, how do I put it? It's very nice to do. It's a really fun quest and a really fun mission, at least a really satisfying story beat. There is a part of me that would have loved there to be a choice where you could decide to, be more honorable. Because I think the idea of this interpersonal play between Jin and his uncle is really interesting. I think it becomes one of those main focal points throughout the game and one of the main story beats. And it's one of those things that, for me, drove the story home. And now, another thing that also does drive the story home and one that every game should learn from is their side quests. Side quests in a lot of games are boring at the best of times. Side quests in Ghost of Tsushima is one of the main reasons why I play the game. Here's the reason. Ghost of Tsushima side quests all focus almost universally on characters you meet throughout the campaign. Yes, there are some that aren't like that, but at best, I'd say about half of them probably do. And some of the storylines are really long. Here is the thing. Very much like the side quests you get where you learn about another character's background, these stories are both touching, but they're also really fun to play through. They're both some of my favorite content in the game, while also being some of the stories I remember the best. And they always all end up with being fairly satisfying to play through, even if just for the story, and it gives you such a big appreciation of the world and the characters themselves that a lot of games completely miss because they decide to have the side content literally be fetch quests. And it is such a shame, because if you use side quests really well, like a game like Ghost of Tsushima does in my opinion, it becomes one of those things where it's something you can do to learn more about the world, the characters, and so on. Whether it is the monk that goes rampage or the lady of another house who lost her family and you see her first for revenge and eventually getting that. There is a lot of conflicting emotions and a lot of interpersonal play that, in my opinion, the game does handle really well and really maturely in a really good way. And it is one of those things that I'm genuinely really looking forward to seeing how Ghost of Tsushima handles, because a lot of games don't know how to handle side content. And now, I mentioned a bit ago that I thought the combat can get kind of stale. To describe the combat for you, it's honestly not that hard to figure out. For one, you have your parry system. It works on any other parry system. You press the parry button when the enemy is close. You can parry him if you wait a little longer, that is a little bit more on the edge of whether or not you take damage. You can perfect parry him, which opens him up to an immediate counter attack. If you do neither of these, you also have a normal dodge and a dodge roll. Yeah, well, you can eventually operate it into a dodge roll. Neither of them are the best things. What makes the combat really cool is when you get these perfect parries or the perfect dodges, you can actually get the slow-mo effect where you can do either a large amount of damage or one-shot an enemy. However, that's not all there is to combat. Outside of your gadgets, you also have 4 stances. Each needs to be used against a different type of enemy. And this sounds fine, but the reality is there's no cooldown system, there's nothing to keep you and prevent you from just spam switching. And the reason why there isn't is because you'll be facing almost every enemy type all the time. And it is not that fun to play with, because it eventually just revolves into you using 1 or 2 and then you use it against all of the enemies. It's a bit of a shame because the rest of the game is so solid. And it has to be said, of course there's also gadgets to spice up the combat, be it your bow, but there are also more gadgety gadgets, such as a smoke bomb and so on. And all of them you can have a multi-load of uses. I used as an example the smoke bomb a lot to get away from enemies, or simply to go and get spotted and then assassinate them, which is a viable strat. And it's kind of cool to see all of those sort of things being represented in both the multiplayer and the single player. And all of these sort of things also translate combat-wise to the multiplayer, which is why I will here divert my attention over to the free multiplayer update Ghost of Tsushima got, called Ghost of Tsushima Legends, with over around 9 missions and, of course, 3 raids, survival missions, and PvP, or form of PvP anyway. Ghost of Tsushima Legends has a bunch of stuff, so let's just delve into what the hell it is. Ghost of Tsushima Legends is a side mode to the normal Ghost of Tsushima that very much so works like operations or stuff in Space Marines 2, but I will call it infinitely better almost. I love this gameplay mode. There's no microtransactions in it, all of the items are unlocked by just playing, and there are some really cool armor sets you can earn for just playing the game and doing some of the higher level, harder content. And all of that is always nice to see. I love to have different cosmetics I can earn via just playing the game, through different challenges and things like that, and I think it's one of the major things that makes the multiplayer so satisfying. Another thing that makes the multiplayer so satisfying is loot. Yes, the normal type of loot. Exactly the type of loot you're thinking about. Rarities? Absolutely. We are talking a game that works a lot like Destiny in the sense that you can only have one legendary item equipped, just like Destiny 2's exotics, but then they're supposed to be these really powerful things. And some of them legitimately are. Most of them work by taking something from the main game and adding it onto the weapon. As an example, instead of, fire arrows, you can have a fire bow or bleed bow and so on. It's kind of interesting. Where it gets really interesting is when you get things like a bow that can shoot 3 arrows at the same time at either different targets or the same one to deal either massive damage or just kill 3 different targets. And all of the synergies just play into it. It's a really interesting little system where you can set up a multitude of builds and play and all of that, which I think is completely fucking cool. I love Legends. I also love the fact that it has its own dependent story aside from Ghost of Tsushima, based on some legends and stuff like that, and there's apparently an anime being worked on the story. Don't know exactly why you do that, but it is kind of interesting. I think Legends is incredibly good. I think it's a really solid added game mode that is added for free, mind you, with no microtransactions. Fundamentally, yes, it is just more of Ghost of Tsushima. This time though, you have to pick a class and farm loot. Fundamentally, I get that. However, on a bigger level, it isn't just more of Ghost of Tsushima. It's a completely different mode, and the fact that you can play with your friends means that you can enjoy it in a way you haven't been able to join the normal Ghost of Tsushima. It also means that there are raids, and raids actually require you to have multiple people. Some of them are complete soloable, specifically the third one, and I think the second and first one you can't really solo it. Which means that I unfortunately haven't been able to, despite the fact that I actually did play with one of my very good friends throughout the story. And I think it is overall a pretty solid story there too, albeit I will say it wasn't as interesting as the main game, of course. But for a side thing, I think Legends is more than perfectly fine. I think it is pretty fucking solid for what it is. And I wish we would see more of that going into the future. It is quite frankly gaming's best co-op mode in any single player game you purchase. I think it is incredibly solid. I think it's nice that they didn't use that as a marketing strategy or, God forbid, push microtransactions into our faces. They actually respected people's time by just letting it exist, man. And the thing is, yeah, okay, of course, the game does become drier and drier because it gets older. It happens, and the game hasn't been updated. But I could have seen, if this game had gotten updates and updates after updates, that it would probably eventually be one of the better, if not best, multiplayer co-op things out there. Because it is really fun to play, it is 4-player co-op, and the raid, I've seen it, haven't played it, looks amazing. I wish I could play it, but it is what it is. Anyway, I have simpered enough for this game. I will mention, yeah, there are some networking issues sometimes in Legends. Yes, there are some repetitiveness of the open world in Ghost of Tsushima. Overall, there are flaws. But this game is an absolute masterpiece, and one of the games that came from a major studio that I will probably never quite forget in how it made me feel and how at peace it made me feel. Either by the haiku system or just wandering around and exploring. This game will forever remain with me, and I think the journey of Jin Sakai is super fucking dope. And I hope they can achieve some of that same level with Ghost of Tsushima. I think they can, and I certainly will be checking it out. And with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful day ahead of you. I've got a new mic here, so you might hear some audio differences, and we'll see how it goes. But for now, thank you so much, and I'll see you all in the next one. Also remember to like, comment, and subscribe.